Hello, this is Kevin Jeffries with the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and I'm excited to announce the start of the FY26 Nonprofit Security Grant Program. This is a grant program that is facilitated through the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and it is funded through the Department of Homeland Security. This is a federal grant program, and we have a lot of things to share with you today and explaining the application process as well as the program itself. There's going to be more updates to come, and so make sure you visit our website, which is located. I'll share the screen for that. Oh, this is our website, so feel free to pause the video and take this down and visit this website. We'll be providing updates to the grant program on this website. All right, so for today's training, we're going to be going over the notice of funding. We're also going to be talking about the information you need to provide in your application and who's eligible to apply. So the nonprofit grant program is designed as a funding source for nonprofits to harden their facilities against acts of violence. Many of the nonprofits that apply under this grant have a what we call a forward-facing ideology that makes them a target to hate crimes or other acts of violence or terrorism. And the federal government's recognized that many of these nonprofits provide a very important and valuable resource to the community in disaster response, but also in serving the community in which they represent. And so we have a lot of interest in providing funds to those organizations to harden their facilities, to train their staff, and to keep everyone who visits those facilities safe. Eligible applicants to this grant program include churches, synagogues, mosques, all houses of worship that are not that are nonprofit 501c3. Those houses of worships would be considered exempt. You don't need to show status of being an actual nonprofit 501c3. You can just as a house of worship, you're able to apply. Other nonprofits could be public service organizations, community activity, community action partnerships, things like that, as well as nonprofit private schools and schools of higher education and universities, those that are nonprofit, not related to any government, but those private nonprofit universities and schools. Typically, the projects that we see under this grant include bollards, anti-vehicle barriers, blast windows, new updates for windows, doors, security cameras, lighting, fencing, as well as private security for especially for these major events that you might be having at your facilities. This grant program is also very generous. It's $200,000 per project, with a total of $600,000 available per organization, which means each organization, if you have multiple sites that you might want to harden, the organization can do up to $600,000 worth of projects across those sites, as long as each one of those projects is within $200,000. This grant program also is funded through two different sources. There's the nonprofit security grant program, or what we call NSGP UA, as an urban area. And those are for organizations that are located within the Portland metro region and those aligning counties. So Multnomah County, Clark County, Washington, Columbia County, Washington County, Clackamas County, and Washington County. If you're within that area, you can apply under the Nonprofit Security Grant Program urban area. For anyone who's outside of that urban area, you would be applying under the Nonprofit Security Grant Program state, or NSGPS. And that program is for all the rest of the state, not including Washington, but all the rest of Oregon would be able to apply under the NSGPS. And the other nice thing is that you can apply if you have organizations in the Portland metro region as well as in the state. You can apply different for those programs from both the NSGPS and NSGP UA. However, you're still limited as an organization to projects under $600,000 in total. So very generous. I will say that the urban area projects, those are highly competitive. You're going to be competing against projects across every urban area in the country. Whereas the Nonprofit Security Grant Program S, you're going to be competing against projects just within the state of Oregon. And so we pretty generous, and it is very competitive. So we really encourage folks to do their due diligence, really write clear applications, and we'll explain how to do that more in a second. But it is a great source of funding to protect your patrons, your staff, and your campus. So first thing I'm going to go over is the application document that you're going to have to fill out. And then we're going to talk about application deadlines and dates and for future training at the end. All right, so on our website, we'll be providing this document. This is called the Nonprofit Security Grant Program Investment Justification. This is the form that FEMA provides for you to fill out and provide all your information. This document is very tricky. You have to download it onto your computer and open it through Adobe. If you were to open it through a browser, it would show a warning saying, or it's waiting for it to download. FEMA has embedded in this document code that allows them to extract the information out of it. So it must be opened up through an Adobe Reader or an Adobe platform. You can't read it, you can't modify it, you can't do anything with this document in a web browser. It must be opened from your website, from your desktop. So the instructions on this are pretty straightforward as you were to follow along on the questions that they're asking. So the first thing we want to know is your legal name of your organization. So this name really needs to match with the unique entity ID, which you must also have. So you would go to sam.gov and register. If you don't have one at this point because of the deadlines, you probably won't be able to have one in time for this application. But your name needs to match what it is on your unique entity ID. So that's the legal name of your organization. Please provide the physical address of where this, not just your organization's head, but where the improvements are going to be made. So perhaps you have an office in Hillsborough, but you're going to be working on a campus in Lincoln City. You would provide the information for the campus in Lincoln City that's going to be updated. So provide your address there, zip code. The other thing we want to know is if you own this building or not. If you don't own the building, you're going to have to show whether or not you have permission to make modifications to the building. We don't want to get in the middle or provide funding for anything that might create a conflict between you and your landlord. So we want to make sure that you own the building. The next question they're asking, are you the only nonprofit operating in that facility? So it's not uncommon where we'll see multiple nonprofits working within one campus or one building. And we can't have multiple nonprofits applying for security cameras for the same building. So we need to make sure that there's only one nonprofit applying on behalf of all those organizations within that building. If there are multiples, that's fine. You just need to explain the relationship there and make sure everyone understands you're going to be the only one applying. We also want to know what your mission statement is. And so you'll be providing us a copy of your mission statement. And based on your mission statement, please summarize your organization's mission, ideology, and beliefs. So in this box here, provide your mission statement, what your organization does, and why do you think that, or why does that why does that make you a target, I guess? And I'll explain more about that in a second. So based on your mission statement, please summarize your organization's mission, ideology, and beliefs. So not just your mission statement, but like, what do you do? What does your organization do? And then we're going to be asking, what is the primary type of organization? So as you can see here, is it educational? Is it religious? Is it medical? Or is it another type of organization? If other, you're going to need to describe. And again, oh, sorry, I'm having trouble with the cursor here. All right, so coming down here, so I mentioned the unique entity ID. If you have one, please click yes and provide that information down here. Are you physically located in an urban area? So as I was mentioning with the urban area, Portland metro region versus the state. So here you would mark the, if you're in the Portland area, you would select the Portland urban area. If not, you would say no, and you can move on. All right, now we're asking for some background information about your organization. So really what we want to know is what it is about your organization that makes you a threat or a target to a threat. This location's symbolic value as a highly recognized national historic. So tell us about your organization. What about the building makes it a target? What about the building makes it obvious what's going on in there? Is the building maybe a historic mosque that everyone who drives by knows exactly what it is? You're not discreet. It is very obvious what that organization is. So tell us about that. What makes that organization a possible target of terrorism or other extreme attack? And it doesn't have to be just your organization. It could be a like organization across the country or somewhere else in the state. That's totally fine as well. So just tell us about what about your ideology? And if you have any examples that you've experienced personally or other organizations around your area that have experienced something personally, please provide that information. And if we also want to know how your organization has been involved in, if possible, any response to, or prevention, protection, or response or recovery from a major incident. So during the COVID crisis in 2020, a lot of these nonprofits also provided vaccine locations. Maybe during heat events, they might have cooling shelters or warming shelters or evacuation centers during wildfires. If your organization's been involved in that, we really like to know. Those organizations who are not really insular, but really get involved in the community and the general readiness of and response capabilities for the region, we want to invest in those, make sure those organizations are well protected. Right, now we're moving on to part 3. So we're going to talk about the risks. So in this section, we're going to talk about the threat that you might be facing. What are your vulnerabilities to that threat? And what potential consequences could happen if that threat were to actualize and now we have an event? So based on the threat, so what organizations or what about your particular nonprofit make you a target? Be as specific as you can. Understanding that you don't need to call out particular organizations if you don't feel comfortable doing that, but give us the details. What about your organization makes you a threat? Who do what is the threat to your organization? If you have, maybe you've had vandalism at your organization, if you had any insurance claims against that vandalism or any like actual physical threats or anything like that, describe those here. Under vulnerabilities, please describe your organization's current vulnerabilities to addressing those threats. So for instance, if you've had vandalism, people coming up and maybe scratching symbols into your doors, well, the vulnerability is we don't have any gates to keep people from coming up to our doors. We don't have cameras, we don't have lights, things like that. Those create a vulnerability that would need to be addressed. And then the last part is the potential consequences. What happens if something bad were to happen to your organization? Who's there? Who would be impacted? What are the long-term effects of not having access to that building? Or how many people attend to maybe your services if something were to happen? How devastating could that be? So really explaining the volume of the impact. It's also, as we kind of go back and look at the second part, as it deals with vulnerabilities, Everyone who applies for this grant is required to have a vulnerability assessment done. So looking around your campus, and there's resources on our website to help you do this, but really kind of looking at where are your vulnerabilities? Are your windows safe? Do your doors lock? Do you have gates? Do you have security cameras? Do you have maybe shrubs and things close to your building where bad people might be able to hide? So doing an assessment, you can work with local law enforcement. You can also work with the Oregon Titan Fusion Center, who can come out and do an assessment for you. Based on the time that is available to apply, it's likely you're going to have to do one of these yourself if you haven't done one already. So you're going to have one of those. And when you talk about vulnerabilities, you're going to need to reference that assessment. Now, we don't want to see the assessment. We want to know that you've done one. But because of the security vulnerability, we want to make sure you're keeping that information secure and not even sharing it with us. And the reason is you might have 20 things that you need to address, but under this grant and the funds you have available, you might only be able to address 2 of those things. And so we don't need to broadcast all of the other things that are yet to be resolved. So as you're talking about your vulnerabilities under this project, describe them here and make sure you're referencing your vulnerability assessment. All right, so the facility hardening, this is the next section, section 4. So what do you want to do to resolve this? So based off of your threats, vulnerability, and information you provided based on your vulnerability assessment, what do you want to do to fix the problem? So what we're going to be looking here is really what's the most effective way to address the problem. So for instance, maybe you have someone who keeps coming up and vandalizing your front of your building, putting hate speech, carving it into your doors, your windows. Providing lights in your parking lot may not resolve that problem. Maybe putting security cameras might be a deterrent, but they might just mask up and go and do it. Perhaps you need something to keep them away from your door, like a gate or a 24-hour or evening security. So as you're describing your solutions, make sure you're trying to come up with the best solution possible to avoid future damage. What we don't want to see are examples like, we keep having trespassers coming up to our building and doing damage. So we would like to install anti-vehicle barriers in front of our building. Anti-vehicle barriers are not going to keep someone from walking up to your front door. So just making sure that you have the most effective solution to the problems that you're describing. All right, so as we discuss equipment here, you're going to want to talk about, as you reference those items that you mentioned above. So if you want to install security cameras, there's a code here that you would scroll down and find security cameras, and then you describe the vulnerability that's being addressed. So maybe your vulnerability is we have no way of monitoring who is coming and going through our building at night. So you would say we want security cameras in order so we can monitor that. And what is the estimated cost? Perhaps you have a poor lighting, so it's difficult to identify people who are coming and going. Or maybe you have access control issues. Maybe you want to install key cards. So you would be able to monitor who comes and goes through your campus based off of the assigned key cards. You can do that here as well. So you would list out all the equipment that you'd like to purchase under this grant, and to the best of your ability, how much you think those things will cost. The next up we have are the key activities. So these are your milestones. Everyone who applies under this grant will have to complete an environmental planning and historical preservation review, or an EHP. If you are selected, we will work with you to get the EHP completed. It is a lot of work, so we will hold off on having you do that until you're guaranteed the funding. But that would be a necessary project that everyone would have to complete, a milestone. And for the start date on this, I would say into this spring of the following year. So right now we're in 2026. We expect these awards to be assigned in September. I would suggest that we would not you wouldn't start on these projects until maybe March of next year. So the EHP should be submitted or completed, I would say by February or March of next year. So any other milestones you might have. So hiring contractors, ordering equipment, providing training for staff, doing an evacuation plan or a security strategy that you might have. All those things can be funded under the grant, but you need to make sure that you have reasonable timelines in order to get those things done. All of the nonprofit security grant programs will have 2 years to complete this work. And so factor that in. If you get your award in September, you'll have 2 years from then in order to get this project completed. All right, the next thing we want to know is who's working on this project. We want names, phone numbers, contact information. So if there's any issues that we might run into, we want to see that we have a point of contact in order to get things addressed. And then impacts. Please describe the measurable outputs or outcomes that indicate that this was a successful project. We're going to be coming out and visiting with you sometime during your project, and we'll be doing a closeout conversation with you. We're going to want to know that this investment was successful, and that you've addressed those threats and those vulnerabilities, and that you're ready to go. So describe that to you. What do you think how would we measure a success of this project? I would recommend you go back up and look at your vulnerabilities and make sure those are addressed as you fill this part out. The last thing we want to know is your nonprofit ever received funding in the past for these grants. And so we provide that information here. And then lastly, you can ignore this bottom part. We are not going to be accepting nonprofit sub-applications. So this is if we are working through a consortium of nonprofits that might be applying under you. This does not apply to Oregon's program. All right, so that is the information for the investment justification form that you'll need to fill out. The other thing I want to share with you is our some key dates and things to consider. So our website, like I said, is mentioned here. We'll be providing links for additional training. We will be holding trainings on July 1st and Thursday, July 3rd at 1 o'clock. And this will be question and answer periods as well. So if you have any questions about the applications, you can reach out to us through that training. The link for that training will be available on our website, which is listed here. Some other key dates to consider is the registration deadline. We need this information so that we can communicate with you prior to submitting your applications in case there's anything wrong. So you need to register by July 13th. That registration link will be provided on our website. And the application, we must have all applications submitted to us by July 15th, and those will be submitted through email. So you'll be going to our website, registering, as well as downloading the investment justification form and filling it out and emailing it to shspadmin@oem.oregon.gov. So some other key things to keep in mind with this grant program is the funding for this is provided by the federal government. And so you'll be entering into contract with OEM and it will be funded through the federal government. OEM will be administering this grant, will be the ones you're going to be submitting this is a reimbursement grant. So you'll be doing the work, ordering the equipment, hiring the contractors, and you'll be submitting requests for reimbursement to OEM. And we'll be the ones reviewing that and providing you reimbursement for all those things. So it's important to know that this is a reimbursement grant. You're not getting the money up front. You have to complete the work, show proof that it has been completed and that you have paid all your bills associated with this grant, and we will be reimbursing you. Again, please visit our website and check it regularly for updates. And we wish you the best of luck as you submit your applications and work on this. If you have any questions, again, visit our website. Contact information is available there. And we look forward to working with you this next year on this important grant program. And we'll see you at the trainings. Thanks.